Our specialist this evening is Dr. Vivian from an Afrikindness volunteer. She is the lead for our neurodiversity and inclusion campaign, and she is a mental health expert with 12 years of experience, and she specializes in trauma-informed care, parenting education, and neurodiversity inclusion. She does hold a doctorate of optometry and a master's in clinical psychology. She is also a certified in trauma and addiction treatment, mental health first aid, and is a UK trained facilitator. At Afrikindness, as I said, she leads our neurodiversity community program, and she continues to support us through advancing our community campaigns and research in neurodiversity and children's mental health. So on the screen are just some questions or some ideas if you think you're not sure what to ask or need some ideas to help you go forward, then please feel free to use what is on the screen in front of you. Dr. Vivian, do you have anything you want to start with?
I'll just like the screen says, we'll just explore together like the bits of the conversation on the screen while we wait for people to share their own questions. And I think the core of it is, how do I build a strong connection with my child? And that's really, really important, because at the backdrop of anything that we want to do with our children would be that connection, that relationship. There is really nothing you can do with a child as a parent if the relationship is not there, because that relationship is the foundation, and it is what determines the outcome of whatever you want to teach your child, however you want to relate with your child, the interactions you want to have with your child, and the person that your child becomes eventually when they leave your presence. So I just want to ask, and let's just really reflect, how many of us would like our children to listen to us when we tell them to do things? How many of us would like our children, how many of us here would like that when you tell your child to do something, that they would, easily just listen and obey and, do that thing?
I will be the first to say yes. All of the above immediately.
Then another version of that question is, how many of us will want that our children will come to us when they have made the greatest mistakes of their lives? How many of us?
Yeah, I do too, I think.
Yes. So the thing is, we want the two things. So the first is, we want our children to listen to us, and that's obedience. Like, that would require obedience, that would require compliance, right? If we want our children to come to us when they have made the greatest mistakes of their life, that will require connection, and there are two different things. And we grew up, if you grew up, most of us here are African, from what I see on the screen. If you grew up in Africa, we were raised in a culture where, compliance was high up there. As a child, you were literally not heard or seen. You were just told, you were just expected to do as you were told. And one thing with culture and indoctrination is that somehow what you saw predominantly, or how you were raised, will shape how you show up for your children, unless you consciously unlearn and relearn. And why that is important is because now we are in the UK, for many of us who have migrated, and now raising our children in the UK. One of the things that we will notice is that we are now raising our children in an environment that gives children the freedom, the liberty to be curious, to question things, to ask you questions. And it almost feels like disobedience. It almost feels like, your children are standing up to you, and it's not something you're used to. And one thing I have found out by interacting with parents in my work is that a lot of parents are parenting from a place of fear, because obedience is so important to us that we we are now knee jerk with whenever we see our children, whenever our children question us, it's misinterpreted as disobedience, and we are now functioning from a place of fear because we're raising our children in a different culture. We don't want to lose them. We don't want them to become, children who do not listen to their children, to their parents, because culturally we want to raise well-behaved children, children who will represent us well, children who will obey us. And in the process of parenting from that place of fear, we miss moments for connection with our children because we're constantly trying to get that obedience, we're constantly trying to correct, we're constantly trying to reprimand. And this is not to say that there is anything wrong with correcting your child. This is not to say that there is anything wrong with desiring that your child is an obedient child, but this is looking at what is important and why it is important. Because when you prioritize obedience over connection, the the odds are at the end of the day your child will obey you. Your child may even become afraid of you and do the things that you say. But if that connection is not there, the relationship that you have with that child is limited, because they will only obey you in front of you, and behind you they're not, they may not really care if the relationship is not there. And they're only waiting for a time when they have their freedom. And we're in the UK, once a child is 16, there's really nothing much you can do anymore, because they become their own. They start to speak for themselves. You can't tell them what to do anymore. So this is why it's important that we start placing connection as a priority. Why? Because with connection you can even get that obedience. When you have that connection with your child, when you have built the foundation of connection with your child, then obedience comes naturally to the child. And what does it mean to have connection? Connection simply means that in that relationship, with your child, that every human being is asking one simple question: am I safe here? Am I safe enough to be myself? Am I safe enough to be vulnerable? Am I safe enough to be open about how I feel without being judged, without being condemned? And that is constantly what our children are asking us. So it's what pausing to reflect on the relationship that we have with our children and asking yourself, have I created a relationship? Have I created an atmosphere in my home where my children are safe to be themselves, where my children are safe to come to me naked and not ashamed, where my children are safe enough to share their difficult feelings with me, right? Because at the end of the day, none of us are going to raise perfect children. Your children will make mistakes, whether we like it or not, because the goal is not to shield them from the world. The goal is to teach them how to navigate through the world, right? And in that process of navigating through the world, there'll be moments where they'll make mistakes. But our problem and our goal is that we don't want to raise children who, that when they find themselves that they have made mistakes, that they're running away from us because of fear of judgment, because they are afraid of what we're going to say to them. Because when that happens, they're going to run into someone else's hands, and we don't have control of who that person is, the kind of counsel that that person can give them, and what will happen in that process, right? Let me give you an example of a real life situation. These are two different teenagers, the same age. I think they were about 15 years old. They were invited to a class party, and it was just, secondary school class party. They thought it was, usual, their friend having a birthday party. And one of the teenagers told their mom, oh, we're going to this class party, blah blah blah, this is the address, this is where I'm going to, shared all of the information because she felt safe to share that. The other teenager has a strict parent who will not allow her, go to those kind of things. So she came up with a story and, lied to her mom. And then they get to the class party, and it wasn't what they expected. It was children who were going wild. There was alcohol, there was drugs, and It was easy for the teenager who had shared with the parent to just call the mom and say, Mom, I don't understand what's going on here. Please come pick me up. And the next minute, the mom was there, picked her up, and they went home. But the teenager who did not share where she was going to had a difficult time, you know, to share that with the parent, because first of all she had lied. Now what's she gonna say? She didn't even say she was coming to a party, so how's she gonna be open with her parents and all of that? So that, because of that feeling unsafe with her parent, she had exposed herself to that environment for a longer period of time, which could, like, safety and connection would have saved her from, if she had that relationship with her mom, right? So that's the importance of connection, that yes, our children will make mistakes, but if they have that connection with us, they will be safe enough, they'll feel safe enough to come to us when they have made mistakes, and that would save us a lot of problem. That will save them a lot of problem as well. If we're able to get the foundation right, which is the connection, half of the problems that we have in parenting will be solved, right? So think about it. In your home, in the interactions that we have with our children, are we creating a safe environment where our children can comfortably be themselves? Many times I've seen parents who say, oh, my children, when they go outside, people say they're well behaved, but when they come back home, they're all wild, noisy, always crying. And I tell them that's because they feel safe at home. If your child is, uptight and, walking around on eggshells, doing everything right at home, being a perfect child at home, then you should be more worried, right? But if they're being themselves, they're able to express themselves, that gives you an insight into who your child is really, truly is. That helps you know that they're safe, and that gives you the opportunity to actually teach them the skills that they require, and for you to recognize the things that they need. Yes, Adi.
I just have a question. So I feel like my children can be safe at home, they can be themselves, but it's when they leave home and they kind of reaching a point where home is like the only safe place. And I suppose, how do I kind of reinforce that outside of the home? So yes, home is the safe place. Yes, it's they can come be themselves, they can share what they want with me. But then when they leave home, they come back and they're questioning everything they've heard, and sometimes other kids can be really unkind and what have you. So how do I kind of reinforce that relationship, or that, I suppose, confidence that they have when they're at home, but how do I get them to take that outside of the home with them? It's like you said, a lot of us are from a different place, and what we're doing in the house is maybe different to the cultural things that they experience when they go to school or with other people. So I suppose, how do I build that kind of cultural acceptance and resilience outside? That is kind of my struggle at the moment.
Yeah, so it's a really it's a struggle for any parent from the ethnic minority, in the sense that our children do not get the full picture, because yes, they see what we're doing at home and it is acceptable to them, but then they go out and they see what every other person is doing, so they're struggling. They're in that space where they're asking, should I be this or should I be that, right? What is right and what is wrong, or which one should I embrace? So most of our children are actually functioning in dual personality, where because of how we are at home, they're acting out that, but then they go to school, they're more British, then they come back home, they're whatever, maybe African or Caribbean or whatever, is predominant at home. But how I recommend, or how I have approached that, is to have that conversation from a value point of view. Because again, why I say from a value point of view, and this cuts across every conversation that we want to have with our children, there will be different opinions about everything, right? About culture, about food, about sex, about gender. There would be different opinions, and I tell my children this all the time, and I say people will do different things based on what they hold there, which is their value, what their value is, right? But because your surname is Okoye, right? We have an outlined value, right? And we sit down and have conversation about those values, about why we hold those values there, about what those values mean to us as people and as a family, and why we need to leave it out, right? And then I also approach that conversation to say other people are doing things. It may not be right, it may not be wrong. It's just based on their own value. And just as we've had this conversation, they have their own and they have the things they hold dear to them. And that's why they live the way they are. We can accept them for who they are, but we don't have to do things how they do things. And it has really helped me in the sense of, like, many times when my kids go to school and they say, oh, ABC is doing this, why can't I do this? I'll point them back to, remember our values. What's your surname? And because your surname is that, this is how we do things. And it doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong. If it's not wrong, it's just based on their value. And we have agreed that we live by this value. Why do we have these values? What does this value mean to us? And this is how we live, right? Because then that anchors it in something that is like, it's like a culture as well, right? Like a heritage, like an identity that we're building in our home, like the culture of our home. And it makes it make sense. And it makes it like make meaning to them, in the sense of, okay, this is how we do things at home. It's not just that everybody has to do things the same. It's not that people who are not doing things like us are better than us, or we're better than them, right? So it's just based on the family culture that we have, based on our values. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I think sometimes just as a parent, when you're in the moment, things just kind of go out of your head. And I think it's easier sometimes for me to come here and talk and kind of give support, but then in my own family, sometimes I get that kind of mom response of, I need to protect my child. And then, yeah, sometimes it's students, sometimes it's also like educators or other outside professionals that don't always have an understanding
Mm-hmm.
of other cultures,
Yeah.
and they might share views. And then for a child, obviously, then it becomes, well, this person is supposed to be a respected member of the community and I'm supposed to listen to my teacher. And it's been questions of, well, is my mom right? Is my mom wrong? And I've tried having those conversations of differences and getting them to understand,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just been a bit tricky with my younger daughter in getting her to understand that maybe sometimes other adults don't understand like we understand, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. And just
Mm-hmm.
trying to get what I feel like is a very, I thought maybe it was a very adult conversation, but I'm realizing, she's only 9, but I have to have these conversations. So how do I break that down in a way that she understands that maybe sometimes even the adults don't understand? She's not necessarily okay with the children, but getting her to understand from the adult perspective as well is sometimes a bit tricky as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'll keep going back. It's a bit easier now, right now, because it's summer holiday.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, what can I put in place before she goes back to school. She's getting older, going into year 5, and it's going to get harder when she gets to secondary and all of that. So it's just, I want to make sure I'm able to support her in what I feel like is a very tricky kind of world to navigate. And now she's suddenly aware of this, whereas
Mm-hmm.
before she was kind of oblivious, and all of a sudden she's become more aware of cultural context and more aware of that what we do as a family is slightly different to what everyone else around us or what they're saying in school as well is doing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's a common problem for people like us, for the lack of a better word. It's a common thing. It can be anything. Like, it cuts across different things. But there's something you said that I picked up. Like, you said, you feel like it's a very adult conversation, but I would say I don't think, because they are really, really aware of these things. I suppose it's how we present it, where we're not making it look like it's us against them, but approaching it from a point of view of embracing your identity unapologetically. Like, this is who we are, this is how we do things, and this is why. The why is really important, because I find that once they get the why, right? And this happened with my daughter's hair. For a very long time, it was a conversation around, why is my hair like? But once she got the, and there was no perspective I didn't share. I came from science, I came from, heritage, I came from every angle. And I found that once she got it and once she embraced it, it was just, sorted. And she's the one asking to leave her hair out now, carrying, she's the one carrying her afro, and not wanting to stretch it and all of that. So it's just keep having that conversation and be open, very, very open to the questions and to their curiosity. I think it's more of trying to probe, to get how they're thinking about it, and then helping them shape that perspective with evidence, right? If you can look for videos, if you can look for, YouTube videos and stuff like that, to consolidate it. And even better, if it is people around, if it is conversation of experiences of people around their age bracket, because I also use some of that videos of, people who've had similar experiences, to consolidate those ideas for my daughter. So that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. If you have any to share maybe later, that I would like to look at them or see what else I can find. But yeah, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. So one of the things I find that hampers connection for parent-child relationship is when we overcorrect, right? When we're always correcting, always correcting. If we correct too much without building connection, what happens is it's just an automatic response. The child starts to think that they can never meet up to your standard, they can never do anything right, and it makes them start to shut down, because it's almost like every child is trying to please their parents, whether you like it, whether it looks like it or not. Every young person is trying to, be in their parents' good book. So when we're always correcting, especially when the correction is harsh, you put them in their shell, they start to withdraw. So it's important to always try to connect, always try to, even when a child makes a mistake, try to meet them where they are, see things from their own point of view, try to be a little bit more curious, ask more questions than jumping into conclusion and correcting. So the formula is connection before you correct, right? Trying to understand why what happened, how they thought about it, what was their thought process, how did they think that was a good idea. And when you're able to extract that, then it gives you opportunity to teach, because every mistakes or everything that our children would do would be an opportunity to help them shape perspective, help them build a skill, help them understand the mistakes, so that that will not happen again. But when we just jump into correcting, we don't even explore that opportunity fully. We only leave them feeling like this is unfair. I wasn't even heard. They didn't even understand. And many times they beat themselves up, for being stupid. I remember having a moment with my daughter one time where I kind of like tried to correct her harshly, and she was reacting to that, and I even got more upset. I was like, I'm trying to let you know that what you have done is wrong, and you're responding like that. And she was like, she did tell me something that really, made me sit back and reflect. She said, I'm not responding like that because I'm upset with what you have said. I'm upset at myself for being stupid and not doing things right. So many times when our kids have made mistakes, they already know that they have disappointed us and they are already at their low. So hitting them some more in that moment is not helpful. But exploring that world with them and helping them, learn the lessons around that situation would be something that will build more connection and then also help them build the skills that they need not to repeat those experiences, especially, for the older ones. Someone was trying to ask a question.
Richard had his hand up. I don't know if he's still there in chat. No, I can't see him now.
Yes, I'm here.
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you. Yeah, Dr. Okoye, I just want to
Right.
get some clarity about what you meant by overcorrect.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know you did say some other things after that, but I want to know what overcorrect means from your lens. Thank
Right.
you.
Okay. When I say overcorrect, right? How do I explain that? So if a young person's, and this is really relative, if the predominant interaction you have with your child is about lecturing them on what they have done right and what they have done wrong, then you might be in that space of, overcorrecting. Imagine having a boss, for example, that you come into work and every time the conversation you have with that boss is what you could have done better, what you should have done, what you didn't do wrong. How would you feel about your relationship with that boss? You, at some point, you feel like they're picking on you. At some point, you feel like, I can never be good enough for this boss. It's the same thing with our children. And it's the same thing, if we want to create that safety around our children and build that connection, we want to make our interactions with them more positive. Even if you have something to correct, how you do it is what is important. So, creating connection before you correct. So, a child, I want to look for a practical example now. Let's say a child doesn't do their homework, for example, right? That is something that you want to address because you want your child to be responsible. You want them to be able to do their work. But how you do that, let's say you come back from work and you ask, have you done your homework? And you dive right into it. Oh, you never do your homework. That is irresponsible. Blah, 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 blah. That is one way to do it. And that could probably get the child to get their homework done. But that does not help build the connection that you want to have with your child. That does not help to build the critical thinking that you want, to have with your child. Because the goal, again, for a parent is that every moment in time, you're teaching your child how to think, how to know about the consequences of their choices and their actions. So in that instance, a connecting before correcting would be actually asking, why haven't you done your homework, and get them to talk, right? And then using that moment to teach what are the consequences of not doing your homework, because many times children do not also have the full perspective of the consequences of the choices they're making. So for that child, it is me just having 10 minutes and not doing my homework. But as a parent, if you paint a long-term picture of how that can build into procrastination, how that can affect future ambition, how that can affect their grades and all of that, and get them to see it. You have had a conversation which feels like a heart to heart. You have listened, which made them feel seen and heard, and then you still corrected. Instead of just diving into just, blaming and making the child feel shame and making them feel like they can never do anything right, you're rupturing the connection and you're not using that opportunity very well, which is what many of us do. We just jump into, because we're also, when I started, I said because many of us were parenting from a place of fear. So anything our children do makes us feel like we're failing and we can't afford to fail. So we just jump in, we want to fix it. But we need to kind of slow down and know that we're doing our best and try to build the relationship that we need to have with our children, because at the backdrop of that relationship is what we need to teach our children the things that they need to know. They need to feel safe enough and trust us enough to listen to us, and then to know that we have their best interest at heart and we're not judging them. We don't think that they're not good enough. I don't know if I've answered your question, Richard. Richard, you're muted. I think you're speaking, but you're muted, so we can't hear you. While we wait for Richard, someone says, how do I make my daughter comfortable so she can talk well? I have tried. She will talk, then she will not talk. So I think it's the same, it's almost like what I'm saying here now, right? Many times for a child who doesn't talk to you, or for a child who lies to you, it all depends on, to a very large extent, um your response to when they have shared, or your response to, and sometimes that I've had an experience that made me also understand that sometimes it may not even be a direct response of yourself to them or their behavior. It can also be what they have overheard you talking about. I had a session with a teenager one time, and she had things that she could not share with her mom. And when I asked her why she couldn't be open with her mom, and she says, what she said was, I hear my auntie and my mom talking about my cousins and how my mom is like, my mom's reaction to those behaviors, right? And she doesn't even know that me myself, like, I'm struggling with similar things. So how do I go to her and then share and be open with her when I've already overheard, how she's judging my cousin? So sometimes it might be how we have reacted to similar incidences or the things they have heard us say. Sometimes it can also be your response to maybe how, maybe previously when they have shared things to you, right? So one, be present. If your child is trying to share something, no matter how little or how insignificant that story or that incident is, be present, be interested, show interest, even if it feels like it's something ordinary. Be into it. Let your child know that you're really, really captivated by what they're sharing. Be present. If our children are, they're speaking to us, we're on phone typing, and they can read our body language. If we're overreacting, so your child shares something that is shocking to you, that may not be the time to show all the facial expression, right? Approach it with curiosity. Sometimes you can, instead, in your spirit, man is screaming, but physically you might just try to maintain so that they would finish sharing. And if you don't have anything to say in those moments, just say, why? What happened? Ask questions. How did it happen? Ask probing questions. Get them to talk some more. And if you don't have any advice to give, just tell them we'll talk about it later. Use that phrase enough to give you time to actually think about the best approach, because many of us just jump in. They share some. So your child comes to you and share that, I have a crush or I have a boyfriend. You're not supposed to have a boyfriend. It's not time to have a boyfriend and all of that. What you have done is that you have shut that child out, and she might as well have the boyfriend anyway, and you will never know, because your response or your initial response to her telling you didn't feel safe for her to be vulnerable with you. So if a child comes to you and share that kind of thing, or maybe come and ask you what is sex, or what is being bisexual or stuff like that, yes, it's shocking. Yes, you're wondering where your child heard that from. Calm down and then ask all the questions and get all the information. Okay, why are you asking? What happened? Where is that coming from? Where did you hear that from? What are you worried about? What do you want me to help you with? Gather all the information. And it's okay to say, I really don't know what to say right now, but I will think about it and then we can talk about it later. Come off that conversation, and you don't have to address it. It's not an emergency. Many times it's not an emergency, so you don't have to address it right away, because if you go by how you're feeling, you might just spoil the relationship some more. And again, we're hammering on this. You don't want to spoil the relationship, because you need that relationship to actually know what is going on in your child's life. So protect that relationship at all costs, especially in this part of the world that we're in. We can't afford to have our children speaking to other people, more than they're speaking to us. You want your child to trust you enough to come to you with things. So it's okay to actually say, I'm actually a bit surprised. I don't know what to say, or I'm lost for words. I really don't have any advice right now, but I promise you, I will think about it, and we will talk about it when I know what to say. It doesn't make you it doesn't make you clueless. It just makes you a reflective parent, and your child will appreciate it, that you're taking out time to actually think properly about that thing and then having further conversation with them. So control your reaction, control your facial language, because facial expression, sorry, because your body language is not just what we say. Our children are very, very perceptive. They're looking at your face, they're looking at how you're responding, they're looking at your body language and all of that. And that would determine if they will come back to you, if they will feel comfortable to share with you or not. So D, I hope that answers your question. And many times we are worried that, oh, if we do all these things, our children will lose respect for us. But research has shown otherwise. Children who are connected to their parents are more likely to actually obey their parents, right? Children who have that connection, who have that relationship with their parents, are more likely to obey their parents. And I'll use myself as an example, right? Many of the things, because many times I also often wonder how as parents we forget that we were also once children, we were also once young people, we were also once teenagers, and we did things. Many of us did things that our parents are not even aware of, right? Many of the things that I had the opportunity, many of the negative things I had the opportunity to do that I didn't do, were not because I couldn't do them, or because of anything, or because my parents would catch me, or stuff like that. It was more of because I did not want to break the trust that my mom had for me, and I did not want to hurt her because of the relationship that we share. Right. So many times when you have that connection, when you have that trust, when you show your children that you trust them and you love them and build that relationship with them, it actually motivates them and helps them to do the right thing, as opposed to if your child is respecting you out of fear. If your child is respecting you out of fear, two things that might happen. One, for some of them, especially the boys, they can just purposely want to become rebellious. At some point when you can no longer, shout at them, when you no longer have that authority over them, when they feel like they're becoming their own person and there is nothing you can do about it, especially in this part of the world where the government also encourages that, they'll come to a point where they then become rebellious, because it's now their opportunity. It becomes a power struggle, because it's now their opportunity to prove their own point, right? Or they come to a point where they not even want to have anything to do with you. So there's no relationship. Even if they're still living in your house, it's just a thing of they come back, go into their room, there's no conversation, they shut you out. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't force them to share. You can't force them to tell you what's going on in their life. So we really want to build that foundation of connection where the interactions we have with our children are predominantly positive. There'll be times where, you have to reprimand your child, obviously, but let the predominant experience that your child is having with you, let if it is 8 out of 10, let them be positive. And when you have even had the blowout where you guys, you went off, maybe you were stressed out, you didn't have time for all this connection and correcting and all this pampering, and you blew it out, always find time to repair. And what that means is that after that heat of the moment, when everyone is calm, also still come back and look at what has happened, right? And talk about it to say what happened, why did you do this? Also take responsibility for how you reacted that might have been out of place, and repair that relationship and start again. I hope that's helpful. Richard, did you want to say something?
No, she has answered. Has responded to my queries. Thank you very much.
All right. Another thing is, I think what might be going through people's head, especially around discipline, right? Okay, if I'm now doing all of this, if I'm trying to be my child's friend, where is now the place of discipline? How do I discipline them? And that's a really important question. Discipline means to teach, right? The root word for discipline is discipleship, and is from the same root word as discipleship, which means teaching, guiding, leading somebody in the way that they should go, right? And for me, I feel like many of us also respond to discipline around, like in the heat of the moment, which is not very effective, right? And this is why for every family, I always recommend having, even if it's once a week, once every other week, or once a month, where you sit down and reflect on how things are going on at home, and have everybody share opinion and share feedback about how they feel about what has happened in the week or in the month, and have that conversation. What that gives you is, first, it gives you feedback from your children, and they actually make it a judgment fit, make it like whatever is said there doesn't have any consequences. It gives you feedback from your children, and it also helps you see the things that are happening in your home that then shapes the conversation around discipline. What are the predominant behaviors that are happening or reoccurring that you don't appreciate? You bring it out there. Okay, I've seen that you guys are waking up late in the morning and you're not meeting up with school. What can we do to solve that problem? What do we have to do? Where are the gaps? What can we do to solve that problem? And you have that conversation. Everybody comes up with idea. You come up with a plan. And in that moment, you also come up with a consequence, if possible, for anybody who fails to abide. And what that does for you is that it saves you a lot of shouting, it saves you a lot of talking and talking back, because we have all come together. We have all said, this is what we're going to do. We have all said, this is how we're going to do it. And we have all said, if we don't do it like this, this is the consequence, right? So when that behavior happens again, all you need to do is to do a reminder. We talked about this and we said ABC. Do you remember? And it just saves you a lot of back and forth, and a lot of anger, a lot of shouting, and all of that. So discipline should be structured, discipline should be planned, and it should be ongoing, based on reoccurring behavior, based on skill gap. For every time a child does something, the question is it developmentally appropriate? Is it as a result of a gap in knowledge? Is it as a result of a gap in skill? Right? So this thing they have done, is it really, really? So for example, a toddler throwing tantrum is developmentally appropriate. What you then start to do is you start to set boundaries, and then you start to teach them to use their words instead of throwing tantrums. Is it as a result of something they don't know? So sometimes a child can do something and you think about it and it's not something you have ever taught them before. If a child does something that you haven't consciously taught them, it is not right to discipline them for it because you haven't actually taught them. You haven't had a conversation about it. So you're thinking, do they know that they shouldn't do this, or is it a knowledge gap, and or is it a skill gap? So if a 3-year-old is carrying a cup of water and it spills on the carpet, for example, is a skill gap because maybe their hands are not steady enough to carry water from the room to the living room or something like that. So think about it like that. For every time your child makes a mistake or does something or misbehave, it's an opportunity to teach, and those thinking about it like that builds into your family's discipline plan based on the age of your children, based on the predominant behaviors that your children are having. And you then bring it to those conversations to say, I've noticed this is happening very often and I don't like it. It's making me to shout. It's making us to have friction in our conversation and in our relationship, and I want us to fix it. And this is the plan moving forward. This is my expectation. This is where I hold you accountable. This is where you hold me accountable. And this is the consequence if this doesn't happen. So an example, a big one is the screen. So your children have screen, we buy them phone, we buy them tablets, and we just give it to them. What conversations are we having around that even before we expose them to those things? What are the expectations? Do they know? What are the consequences for overuse? Do they know? Has that been clearly communicated? And are we consistently establishing that and instituting that as we go? Yes, Adi.
Just a quick one about kind of maintaining those boundaries and those things. And I know you said about not like overcorrecting and things, but when they become teenagers, that can sometimes be a bit more tricky. And then it gets, just in previous experience, it can sometimes be a bit more difficult to maintain that relationship and maintain with everything going on through teenagers. So I guess just any advice about that particular period with everything the child is going through. And like you said, how we were raised is entirely different. So sometimes from my perspective, getting support from like parents or family that are older than me is just, I feel like I'm sat in the middle of maybe being the first generation of parents that's trying to do things differently, particularly when it comes to having a teenager, as well as trying to maintain those boundaries, but still keep that, healthy relationship with your child. So just any advice for that as well.
So I know that, like, it's the parenting is really, really in stages, right? So as your children grow, the roles changes. As the more independent they become, the less in their face you will be, if that makes sense. So for your toddler, you're in control. You tell what they do. Once they start getting towards teenager, young adults, it becomes more like coaching and conversations, more or less. And many times we feel like, especially with teenagers, like you said, a lot of outbursts and the hormones and everything happening, it feels like what we're doing is not working. But as we have those conversations, right, what I find is that yes, they would have that outburst, but you're still the balance, in the sense that you regulate the emotions. You don't let that tip you off, right? But you still keep the firm boundary. So, for example, if I say it's end of screen time for my teenage child, I don't expect them to take it happily and come and submit their screen to me and say, "Oh, thank you, mommy." They're gonna have, it's gonna upset them because it's obviously something that they enjoy. Think about it as yourself as well. Like, if someone came and took something that you really enjoyed, you're gonna be sad, right? So I'm gonna give them the space to feel what they feel and how they feel, but I'm going to maintain the boundary, which is it is the end of screen time, and not allow what they feel to rile me up. That is where we have to, hold ourselves accountable. And this is where our own traumas and our own unmet needs, our need for control comes into play, where that reaction triggers us and then we go into a power struggle with them, right? But many times the expressions of their feeling should be allowed, because it is actually what they feel. It would be unhealthy to say you don't feel okay, but you're acting okay. Do you understand? So what I would say in that moment is, I know you're upset that I'm taking your screen, but this is the boundary that we have to keep, and I'm sorry, I have to keep the boundary. It's okay to feel, you know, whatever you feel. If they get rude, I work with a lot of young teenagers and young adults, and I always, once I go in and I'm like, the moment you get rude, there is no conversation, because I don't engage with rudeness, right? So I'm going to allow you calm down, and when you're ready to have a conversation, then we can talk through it. So if they get rude, I disengage. I don't engage with that rudeness, because then when you do, you are the thermometer, if that makes sense. You are the one who shows more control in that situation, because if they rile up and you rile up, then you enter into a power struggle. It then becomes a battle of who will wear each other out, and you don't want to put yourself in that position. So in the journey of building this connection and having this relationship, this healthy relationship with our children, it also calls for us to actually build our own emotional resilience and our emotional intelligence, to be able in those moments to be the calm in the chaos. Because teenagers, for example, will respond the way they will respond based on the hormones and the stage of life that they are in and all of that. But what happens is that when they constantly say that those behaviors do not get any reaction from you, they start to see it as futile, and then they learn to work with you, because they understand that, well, this doesn't get me anywhere anyway. The boundaries are still the boundaries are not shifting. I can have my rants, I can have my tantrums, but it doesn't change anything. So it's also a game of who wears who out. But if you continue to feed that, you're feeding that behavior, and every time it will keep happening. But if you don't engage, after a while they start to realize that there's no point, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Bumi.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dr. Vivian. It's been a very great session. My question is really around children or young people who struggle internally. So, a few young people who are introverted in nature, and they struggle naturally to communicate or to engage. And then you have a parent who's trying to build connection with this child. Sometimes that process could be very frustrating for parents, and I know a lot of parents sometimes just withdraw, and you see the child going in a different direction. Parents are struggling to connect. What would be your advice for parents who have this kind of children or young people?
I think it's about expectations. Many times, I think many of the pains or the challenges that we have is because we have built a picture or an expectation of how a child should be and who they should be and how they should respond. I think that for a parent, what your child wants to know is that you are there, right? I am here for whenever you need to have a conversation. And you need to reiterate it, you need to reassure them, and you need to create intentionally moments where you're there. And it doesn't have to be moments filled with activities, it doesn't have to be moments filled with conversation. So, for example, I have an introverted daughter. So, those moments can be 15 minutes where I'm lying on my bed and whatever she's doing, I just tell her to come and lie with me and do it there on my bed, right? And in those moments, I'm just creating a space where I let her know that, I'm here for you, right? I'm here, even if we're not having a conversation, even if you're not telling me much, I'm here for you. Connection doesn't always have to be filled with words. It doesn't always have to be filled with activities. If the child is introverted, they're introverted. They don't talk much, they will not say much to you. They internalize things, they solve their problems internally, they untangle the webs internally, and then they keep moving. And some people are naturally like that. But one thing you want to keep doing for that child is to keep reminding them that you are there, so that when it becomes beyond them, they can come to you. So you need to keep reminding them, and then you need to give them tools. So one of the things I have done for my daughter is to introduce her to journaling, right? Where, she can log in her thoughts, she can log in her worries, and sometimes she allows me to read it, because maybe she's not able to have that conversation with me, but I can read it and then I can advise, because she expresses herself better through writing. So, share tools with them that can help them get out some of the thoughts, some of those internal thoughts, and then create that space where you're also spending one-on-one time with that child. Reduce your expectation of what you want. So you might have two children, and one is a chatterbox. That one, when you spend time with them, they're telling you everything that happened in school, and you're using that expectation to, project on the other child, and you're expecting the same thing, and you're feeling frustrated because that other child is not doing the same, and you're feeling like you're not doing enough for them. That's not right. As far as you're creating that space, you're reassuring that child that you are here. I think you're doing okay. They are not just expressive. They're not just going to be open like that, because if it's a personality thing, it's a personality thing, unless there's more going on. I don't know if that answers your question, Bimi.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do we have any other question?
There's a few in the chat if you want to read them out.
How do we distinguish if the behavior is additional needs or naughtiness? For example, swearing, saying a friend did it in class, but the child keeps swearing and you don't know whether it is additional needs or naughtiness. So, well, with swearing, sometimes they say tics can come, like swearing can be a sign of tic and all of that. If it is constant, then maybe it's a habit. But to answer the question around distinguishing if a behavior is additional needs or naughtiness, swearing in isolation will not be enough yardstick to say a child has additional needs, right? So I would say if the only challenge you're having with the child is swearing, then focus on that needs and try to continue to teach the child that this is not accepted. And unless there are other signs or other indications that this child might be struggling or this child might have additional needs, if you speak with school and they're giving you instances of some other behaviors that might point to additional needs, then an assessment will be required. But if it is just the swearing, I'll just say focus on continuing to redirect your child. If it's possible to separate them from the child who is doing it in school, maybe get them to a different class from that child, have that conversation if it's possible. If it's something you don't like, remember when I said have a value-based conversation, also come at it from the point of view of your values and how that doesn't align with your values in terms of swearing. It's okay if other people fancy it, but for your family, if that doesn't align, then have that conversation from a value point of view, depending again on the age of the child.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say the child has been diagnosed with additional needs. So
All right.
I think the problem is when, like, maybe they don't know the social context in which to do that. So you don't know whether am I correcting this? Do I allow this to slide, or am I overcorrecting by saying no, we don't do this?
So yeah. So even if it is part of the additional needs, right? if it is a tick, right, what it means is that sometimes, the child repeats words without, control of it. You can give them other words, right? So you can still try to attend to that needs and try to reshape it in a positive way instead of allowing them to swear, even if it's additional needs. So if there is a pattern to it where maybe you notice that it happens when they're dysregulated or when something is happening, try to discuss with them, ask them how they're feeling and what's making them to swear, and then try to give them a script, maybe give them other words that they can use and continue to reinforce that and teach that, so you're replacing those swear words with some positive words. It's a long game. It may not just happen right away, but it's not, if it's as a result of additional needs, you don't then now say, oh, this is what it is, and then I'm not going to do anything about it. Even when a child has additional needs, we're still trying to build skills for them to be able to cope, for them to be able to manage, for them to be able to express in a more positive way. So we won't just say because they have additional needs and they're swearing, then we will leave it at that, right? So it's not about how, it's more about how you're doing it than doing it or not doing it. Does that make sense, Joanna?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. As a teacher in Nigeria, we're now in an era where the government has enforced zero punishment in our school, no form of discipline again in the school. The gap between students and teacher is getting wider. Even parents can't correct their words. Students come late to school, fail to do work, no one to correct them in the school because the school owners wouldn't want any problem with parents, with social media criticism. Parents are even helping at home, and on a daily basis the system is collapsing. What do you advise a teacher or school can do to well, this is a more like a system thing. Even if there's zero punishment in a school, there shouldn't be zero consequences, right? So if a child, for example, doesn't do homework, there should be something like detention. There should be something like maybe you miss out on your playtime. There should be consequences for bad behavior either way. So I think it is more about what, the policies of the school, and this would lie with the school owners and what their policies are around discipline and behavior within their school, than it is for a teacher. My understanding of how the Nigerian education system works, as a teacher, I don't think there is anything much you can do, especially if it's in private schools, because the school would already have a policy and you just have to follow with the policy. But I think that every school should have a positive behavior policy, and every school should have, in that policy there should be consequences for certain behaviors, for the young people. Because if there's no consequences, what then are we doing? What are we teaching? Why are we there if we cannot correct them and teach them to behave in the right way? So yeah. Do we have any other question? I think that's about it. Adi, do we have any?
Oh, I have a question. So, where you instill like certain values in the child, say the child, you're predominantly a Christian home, you instill certain values, and then the child goes out there, but you've been trying to explain that other people's also have their own beliefs and their own opinions, but there needs to be a friendly way to kind of agree with people. But the child is very can say things a little inappropriately to people and say, for example, if you don't do this or if you don't believe in God, yes, that's what they believe. But how do you, and I'm speaking from an angle where the child does have additional needs, but then some of these values have been imbibed in them so that when they go out there, they potentially can't distinguish that this is not the right social setting to say certain things. So how do you, because they need to be able to associate with people, but also respect their values or beliefs. So how do you get them to? You've said, speak well, but sometimes, and that's why sometimes my kind of there's a bit of struggle to is where's this coming from? Is it just not listening, or is it just from the angle of the additional needs, which means they
So
don't know?
yeah, so it's a bit tricky. So if the child does not understand those social cues and does not clearly understand like the settings and how to communicate, again, scripting might be, what will happen. But if a child is struggling with social cues, not understanding the boundaries and how to communicate in different social settings as a result of their additional needs, it is what it is. It happens, especially with autistic individuals. But then, like I said, because it is happening doesn't mean that we will not continue to have conversations around that. So it is what it is, but you will just keep teaching. I find that scripting works a lot for, people who struggle with such situations. So one of the things you want to do is, instead of telling, try first to understand the reasoning behind, why do you see the need to tell this person? Why are you struggling with this person not agreeing with you, right? So they can be fixated in their own opinions and trying to get everybody to share the same opinion with them, and that's a thing that's understandable. And anybody who knows that the child has additional needs would give them some grace in that regard. But also, if you're the carer or the parents, continue to have that conversation and continue to find scripts to give to them, like, okay, say it this way instead of this way, can you present it this way instead of this way, can we say this rather instead of saying it this way, and see if they agree with your script, because sometimes they can also be really really fixated in their own ideas, especially if it doesn't make sense for them. So your goal is to is to first of all try to understand how they're thinking about it and go through it logically, because it's only if it makes sense to them that they will buy what you're saying. If you're just telling them, oh, don't say this, they think literally, like they think there's no gray, it is either black or white. So if you've taught them that if you don't believe in God, this is what's going to happen to you, that's what they believe. So go through that process, the thought process with them again, and bring in other people's perspective and go through it again with them logically in a way that helps them make sense of it. That's the only way they can then buy any alternative conversations that you want them to have with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think, yeah, I agree with the scripting. So, for example, when we go to town, they can just meet someone and just like really want to preach to them. And I'm like, you need to build conversation, and you need to try and find other people's interests before you can kind of preach, because obviously they've been to church and they've been told, oh, you should preach to people. So obviously just take it literally, and anybody at all they'll approach. And then actually, so I really agree with what you said about the scripting, but sometimes it's a bit of like, are they really listening? But there was a time we went to a shop, and then I could see that he actioned on that. Like he basically spoke to the person, what's your favorite game, rugby. And then just before we left, he was like, God loves you. Because that was the way I said, instead of preaching at the person, just tell them God loves you. And he actually did that. So thank you. And it's good to, because sometimes you feel nothing is working, but you saying that scripting and me seeing that shows that it actually works, but sometimes maybe not always.
Yeah.
But there will be some success moments. So thank you for reiterating that. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Welcome. Any other question? Right. In the absence of any question, I'll just give us like a bit of like an action plan for everyone. Like, even if you're not living here with anything, I think that as we leave, I think it's important for us to not just assume that we're doing things right. So one action I'll give everyone here is to, if your children are of age and they can have a conversation with you, to just gather them and ask them, just ask them, reflect with them, ask them, what are we doing right, what am I not doing right, what would you, how would you rather I engage with you, how would you rather I correct you, what is the hindrance, what is it that makes you not feel comfortable to share things with me. Just ask questions, and listen. Let nothing they say come as, oh my god, don't express that. Just listen to what they're saying and then take it back and action on them. Many times we feel like we're getting it all right, we're all doing our best, but it's just like in an organization. When you work as a leader in an organization, you always want to get a feedback from your subordinates to know, how things are going and if you're leading well. So it's the same thing with, the family. If you're running a family, don't just be on autopilot. Once in a while, pause and ask the members of your constituents, ask them, how things are going, how everyone is feeling, if everyone feels like you're leading well, and what they want from you, right? And that would give you, I'm sure that if you do that and if you do it effectively, that will give you a lot of action for the summer holiday. That will give you a lot of work to do and a lot of conversations to have, with your kids for the summer holiday. And just spend time, ordinary moments, share. This is how connection is built as well. Find time. I know we're all working, I know the bills are there, we need to meet up with our bills and all of that, but find time to spend ordinary moments with your kids. Share ordinary moments, share a movie, play, go to the parks, ride bicycle, have conversations, listen more than you speak, because when you listen, you get a lot of insight. And one of the things I do is that anytime my children come to ask me for something or ask me a question, I would always ask them, what do you think? Because it helps me see how their own mind is working. I'm always curious as to what's going on in their head, right? So anytime they come, they ask me any question at all, any question. The first thing I do, I don't know why my camera went off, but can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. I don't know why my camera went off. So anytime at all they come to ask me a question, I will always ask, what do you think? What are your thoughts, right? So it helps me see where they're coming from. So I'm not just assuming that I understand what they have said or what they're asking. That helps me, get their perspective fully, and then that helps me make an informed, give them an informed response or an informed decision. So this week, this weekend, next weekend, whenever you have time, get your children together and ask them to give you feedback about how you're parenting them, and let that, give you insight and give you things to work with and help you build that connection that you need with them. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Vivian, for joining us, and for everyone that came this evening. Thank you so much for all of your questions. If you do think of any other questions or anything, please feel free to post it in our WhatsApp group. And just as a reminder, we are having a mindfulness session for parents on Thursday at the same time. Actually, it's 5:45 to 7:30, and this is just about how to, I guess, practice a lot what we learned this evening about how to manage ourselves and control ourselves as parents, and as well to pass these values and skills over to our children. Joanne, I will post a link to the WhatsApp group in the chat for you before we go this evening. Also on Saturday, we only have 4 spaces left, actually. We're having a parents and teens art and mindfulness workshop. So again, it's about being able to support our young people, those who are interested in art. It combines both of them as well. I believe it's from the ages of 11 and up. And then on the 24th of October is our Africanist Parent Conference. There's lots going on. It's an entire weekend. A youth employability workshop, exhibition and business roadshow. It is in person in Leeds. There's also the online neurodiversity summit. And we've got speakers coming in from all over as well to cover various topics for families as well. Feel free to register and get your tickets. It is one of Africanus's biggest events, so we do hope to see you there. I have shared in the chat a PDF that kind of summarizes a lot that's going on in Africanus at the moment. If you would like to have a look and look that up, you can find us as well on all of this information on Facebook or LinkedIn and Instagram, all of the relevant social media pages. So if you would like to follow us, there is a QR code on the next screen. You should be able to scan and register for all of the events through there as well. And I will post the recording from this evening in the WhatsApp as soon as it is available. But please feel free to register for events. We also have a parents page with resources. So lots of the images and infographics that are shared in the parents group, or any questions that we have, you will be able to find those resources on the QR code on the screen. As always, though, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@africanus.org. Again, thank you so much to everyone for attending this evening, and I hope you have a good night.